Hey, Jacob Perry back with you again, CEO and founder of Patagonia Bee Products. Here for another episode of this video series where I talk about different things related to honey, the purity of honey, the origins of honey, what makes honey different, what makes our company different, right? Patagonia, just kind of in general, what we're doing with honey in the world of beekeeping. So, today's topic, I want to talk about honey purity and what we are used to as consumers in the United States. When I was down in Patagonia, Chile, meeting with my beekeepers and kind of discovering that world, what it looked like as a Chilean beekeeper to have your hives out in the temperate rainforest, to then harvest the honey and send it to a lab to get tested and look for different markets to send it to, including the European market, their own domestic market in Chile. One thing I discovered that was very shocking for me was that, the European market is the biggest market for honey, right? For South American honey. That was not the shock. The shock was that Europe has the highest honey standards in the world as far as purity goes. So they can't have any kind of chemicals in it, pesticides, and those might come from what the beekeepers are actually putting on the beehives themselves to prevent pests from entering or to kind of control the pest population, but it's also from pesticides or herbicides that the bees are picking up themselves when they go off to pollinate flowers and get nectar, right? If they're going to agricultural fields that have been sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, then the bees will pick that up, and that gets back in the hives and in the honey. And so when Chilean beekeepers will send their honey off to Europe, to the European market, if their honey does not pass the European standards, if it has residue of herbicides, pesticides, other kind of chemicals, the European Union will reject it. And where do you think that honey goes? I found out that then gets sent to the United States because we don't test for that, we don't control for that. Okay, there's very little oversight by the FDA with honey, so our honey purity really isn't controlled. And so what we're used to getting in the United States, unless you're getting honey from a source that you know. And unfortunately, even a lot of local honey, as much as I hate this because, as many of you know, my dad and I have our own bees, a lot of local honey is still around and near agricultural fields. So then the bees are still picking up that same stuff and it's getting in the honey. So it's really hard to know what's in your honey if you're an American consumer. We're used to getting stuff that is sent from Brazil and India and China and Chile and other places that has no control for, and we don't know what's in it. The beekeepers were using chemicals when they were controlling for pests. The bees are near agricultural fields because there's large, swaths of land with nectar-rich trees of some sort, right? They might be, fruit trees or whatever it is. So that was super disappointing for me, knowing that the American consumer is getting some really low-quality honey. And that's a big part of why, with what we're doing as a company, we only source from beekeepers in this cooperative that send their honey off to a lab and have it tested for chemical residue and make sure that there isn't any chemical residue in their honey that we're bringing up. And they share all that with me. I get the lab results from those labs at universities, right? Science labs, scientific labs at universities in Chile. And so that's what we're doing. This is probably a shock for a lot of the consumers that are thinking, well, honey has to be a pure. It's it's a natural pure substance. Well, it's a pretty magical substance because of the way that bees operate to make it. But there are still plenty of opportunities for it to be contaminated, and unfortunately, we're getting a lot of that contaminated honey in the United States. So there's your episode for today. There's a little piece of information to help you understand as a conscious honey consumer what's going on with your honey and what to look for. You really want honey that's coming from natural places in the world, wherever that be, and finding honey that comes from hives nowhere near agricultural fields and other stuff. So that's really the best way to go. So anyway, there's your episode. Signing out, and we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks. And please, comments, send questions. I'm happy to engage in any kind of follow-up with this. Thanks. Catch y'all later.